She was celebrated as a cosmic hero, a pioneer who peacefully gave her life for science after a week in orbit. At least that was the story the world was told. Please note, the visuals in this video are AI generated and may not be 100% historically precise. The content is intended as both entertainment and educational exploration, not as a definitive historical record. The truth about the final panicked hours of Laika, the first living being to orbit the Earth, was a secret the Soviet Union would guard for 45 years. This isn't just the story of a dog in space. It's the story of a stray chosen for a mission that was never meant to bring her home, and the elaborate lie that hid her tragic death from the world. In the mid-1950s, the Cold War wasn't just about ideology and military power, it was a full-blown race to the stars. The Soviet Union and the United States were locked in a battle to prove who was technologically superior. On October 4, 1957, the Soviets shocked the world by launching Sputnik 1, the first ever artificial satellite. That constant beep 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 coming from orbit was a clear declaration of victory. But Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev wanted an even bigger show. He demanded another space spectacular to mark the 40th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution on November 7th. The timeline was insane, less than 4 weeks to pull it off. A new spacecraft, Sputnik 2, was designed and built practically from scratch. This time, it would carry a living passenger to test how spaceflight affected a complex organism, paving the way for humans. But who could they possibly send? The answer was found wandering the cold streets of Moscow. Soviet scientists started rounding up stray dogs. Their thinking was cruelly practical. Strays were already used to tough conditions like extreme cold and hunger, which made them perfect candidates for the stress of space. They were seen as resilient survivors. They also specifically sought out females, believing they were a better anatomical fit for the tiny capsule and its waste collection system. And maybe most cynically, these dogs were anonymous. They had no owners, no one to protest, and no one to miss them. Among them was a small, quiet, mixed-breed dog, probably part husky and part terrier, weighing about 13 pounds or 6 kilograms. Her first name was Kudryavka, or Little Curly. But when she was introduced to the public, her barking earned her the name history would remember. Laika, the Russian word for barker. Of all the dogs, Laika stood out. She had an incredibly calm and docile nature, putting up with the brutal training with a quiet patience that impressed the scientists. She was the perfect subject for a one-way trip to the stars. Once Laika was selected, her life became what can only be described as systematic abuse, all in the name of progress. To get her and 2 other finalists, Albina and Mushka, ready for the mission, they were put through grueling and inhumane training. To get them used to the coffin-sized cabin of Sputnik 2, the dogs were kept in smaller and smaller cages for long periods, sometimes up to 20 days. This extreme confinement was torture. The dogs grew restless, their bodily functions deteriorated, and their health suffered. Laika was spun in a centrifuge to simulate the crushing G-forces of launch, strapped to vibration tables that mimicked the rocket's violent ride, and blasted with deafening noises. Her food was switched to a special high-nutrition gel, the only thing that could be dispensed in zero gravity. Surgeons implanted medical devices in her body to track her heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. She was fitted into a spacesuit with built-in chains and restraints that kept her from doing much more than sitting, standing, or lying down. In that tiny capsule, she wouldn't even have room to turn around. Despite all this, Laika somehow stayed calm. But the scientists weren't totally heartless. A few days before the launch, one of the lead scientists, Dr. Vladimir Yastovsky, took Laika home to play with his children. "I wanted to do something nice for her," he wrote later. She had so little time left to live. It was a small moment of kindness before a guaranteed tragedy. On October 31, 1957, 3 days before her mission, Laika was placed and chained inside the capsule. The technicians at the launch site, knowing she wouldn't be back, broke the rules to give her a final goodbye, kissing her on the nose. On November 3, 1957, around 5:30 a.m. Moscow time, Sputnik 2 roared to life. As the rocket tore through the atmosphere, the sensors on Laika's body told a story of pure terror. The G-forces were intense, hitting 5 times the normal pull of gravity. Her heart rate, normal before launch, shot up to 240 beats per minute, more than triple her resting rate. Her breathing was more than 3 times faster than normal. She was terrified, confused, and completely alone, but she made it. Laika became the first living thing to orbit the Earth, a huge achievement for the Soviet space program. As Sputnik 2 settled into orbit, her heart rate started to come down. But it took 3 times longer than it did during ground tests, a clear sign of the incredible stress she was under. Then things started to go wrong. A critical failure happened during the launch. The spacecraft's nose cone separated as planned, but a piece of the main booster failed to detach. This catastrophic error broke the thermal control system. Insulation was torn away, and as the sun and the ship's own electronics baked the capsule, the temperature inside Laika's small cabin began to skyrocket. Within hours, the temperature climbed past 40 degrees Celsius, or 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The cooling fan that was supposed to kick in was no match for the runaway heat. The world, however, was told a completely different story. Soviet radio proudly announced the mission was a success. They reported Laika was in good health, calmly orbiting the Earth for days. They kept up the charade, releasing fake updates on her condition. The official story, the one that would last for decades, was that Laika lived for about a week in orbit, dutifully sending back scientific data. Then, just as her oxygen was about to run out, she was peacefully euthanized with a serving of poisoned food. It was spun as a noble, painless sacrifice for the greater good. The world mourned a hero, but it was all a lie. The truth of Laika's final moments was so much worse than the sanitized version the Soviets sold the world. Laika didn't live for a week. She didn't die peacefully. She died in agony, essentially cooked alive in her metal tomb. Telemetry data sent from Sputnik 2 showed that after the initial shock of the launch, Laika was agitated but still eating her food. But then, sometime between the 5th and 7th hour of the flight, during just the 4th orbit, all signs of life stopped. The overheating, combined with sheer panic and stress, had killed her. The hero of the cosmos was dead, only a few hours into her journey. The Soviet government knew it. The scientists knew it. And yet, they deliberately faked the official reports and kept telling the world she was alive and well. This deception was maintained for 45 years. The Cold War demanded an image of perfect Soviet engineering, and the gruesome death of a dog just didn't fit the script. Sputnik 2, now a tiny coffin, continued to orbit the Earth with Laika's remains inside for 162 days, circling the globe 2,570 times before it finally burned up on re-entry into the atmosphere on April 14, 1958. For nearly half a century, the myth of Laika's peaceful sacrifice held. It wasn't until October 2002, long after the Soviet Union had collapsed, that the truth finally came out. At the World Space Congress in Houston, Texas, a scientist from the Sputnik 2 mission named Dmitry Malyshenkov admitted what really happened. He confirmed that Laika had died from overheating and panic just a few hours into the flight. The 45-year lie was over. The revelation proved the mission was rushed for political propaganda, with deadly flaws that were hidden from everyone. Even back in 1957, the mission sparked immediate ethical debates around the world. Animal rights groups protested sending an animal on a one-way trip. But in the Soviet Union, there was little public debate. Laika was portrayed as a national hero. In the West, she became a symbol of sympathy, a victim of a ruthless space race. So did we learn enough from the mission to justify her death? Decades later, some of the scientists involved didn't think so. In 1998, Oleg Gazenko, one of the senior scientists who trained Laika, admitted his deep regret. "The more time that passes, the more I'm sorry about it," he said. "We shouldn't have done it. We did not learn enough from this mission to justify the death of the dog." Still, Laika's sacrifice wasn't completely for nothing. The data from her short flight did prove that a living thing could survive a launch and handle being weightless. This was a critical step that helped pave the way for human spaceflight, leading directly to Yuri Gagarin's historic orbit in 1961. Her tragic mission also forced a major change in policy. After Laika, nearly all Soviet space missions with animals were designed to be recoverable. Today, Laika is remembered as an icon. She's been featured in books, films, and songs. In 2008, a monument was unveiled in Moscow, near the military facility where she trained, showing a dog standing proudly on a rocket. Her story makes us face uncomfortable questions about the real cost of progress and the ethical lines we were willing to cross for knowledge. She was a stray, an anonymous dog taken from the street, but she became a global symbol. A symbol of scientific achievement, of Cold War rivalry, and of the ultimate sacrifice made by a small, trusting dog sent to the stars with no ticket home. Laika's story is a powerful reminder of the complicated history of space exploration. If you found this story as compelling as we do, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories from the archives of history. And let us know in the comments, what does Laika's legacy mean to you? From the cold streets of Moscow to a lonely orbit high above the Earth, Laika's journey was a mix of engineering genius and ethical tragedy. She was a pawn in a superpower's game, a sacrifice on the altar of the space race. The 45-year lie that hid her terrifying death just adds another sad chapter to her story. She wasn't just the first dog in space. She was a silent hero whose fate reminds us that the quest for discovery must always be guided by compassion. Thanks for watching.